When we think about ancient human history, our minds usually jump straight to the pyramids of Egypt, right? Or maybe the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. But today, we're diving into an explainer that completely flips the script on human evolution and migration. We are going way, way back in time, long before legendary kings, to unearth the absolutely awe-inspiring dawn of prehistoric Sri Lanka. And getting a handle on this island's isolated evolution, it actually changes how we view human ingenuity across the entire globe. So let's get into it.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, the arrival of first islanders. Second, we'll look at the master hunters. Third, a really weird phase called skipping the Neolithic. Fourth, the Iron Age leap. Fifth, ancient rituals. And finally, we'll weigh legends versus reality.
All right, Section 1. Arrival of first islanders, tracing those early human steps. The sheer depth of time we're looking at here is, well, it's pretty staggering. Humans have actually inhabited Sri Lanka for at least 125,000 years. Archaeologists literally found Middle-Paleolithic stone tools in coastal sands near Bundala dating all the way back to that exact era. Fast forward to about 34,000 years ago, and we see anatomically modern humans, often called Balangoda Man, setting up shop in cave networks. And by 6,500 years ago, they were forming these massive open-air seasonal campsites, like the ones uncovered at Balangoda Man.
Now, these early Sri Lankans weren't just scraping by. They were highly robust hunter-gatherers absolutely thriving in incredibly diverse environments. I mean, they adapted to everything from steamy, dense rainforests to really harsh, dry zone camps. They made their homes in deep, protective rock shelters. Sites like the Fa-Hien and Batadomba-lena caves have given researchers these massive, deeply stratified deposits of evidence, which really just proves how resilient these early populations were.
Moving on to Section 2, Master Hunters and Toolmakers. Let's talk about the Balangoda culture.
So, these early islanders were brilliant, highly sophisticated toolmakers. They relied heavily on what archaeologists call microliths. Basically, these are tiny, meticulously flaked stone blades and points, usually measuring under 4 centimeters. And this actually represents the earliest known microlith assemblage in all of South Asia. They weren't just out there smashing big, clumsy rocks together. They were crafting incredibly fine, precise instruments that could be hafted onto wood or bone to create some seriously effective weapons.
48,000. That is how many years ago these foragers had already developed bow and arrow hunting. Recent excavations at the Fa-Hien cave revealed these finely crafted bow and arrow points dating back that far. Just think about the gravity of that for a second. This isn't just some local milestone. This is the absolute oldest evidence of bow and arrow technology anywhere in the world outside of Africa. It's just a stunning testament to how advanced their hunting tactics really were.
So what did a typical day in the life of the Balangoda culture actually look like? Well, bone assemblages show us they were actively hunting monkeys, deer, wild boar, and get this, even elephants. But they weren't strictly carnivores. They used stone querns to grind up wild nuts, breadfruit, bananas, and yams. And beyond just eating to survive, they had a really strong sense of self-expression. We found traces of clothing, fiber tools for net making, and even brightly colored ochre and shell beads. It shows that these ancient people actively decorated themselves and engaged in some really rich symbolic behavior.
All right, Section 3, skipping the Neolithic age. This is where we see a very unique leap in time.
Sri Lanka's path to agriculture was, quite frankly, completely unconventional. Paleoethnobotanists studying pollen from a highland region known as Horton Plains found something truly shocking. Around 15,000 BCE, humans were already actively managing wild grains, things like oats, barley, and early rice ancestors. They were deliberately burning grasslands to create the ideal environments for these plants. It was an unprecedented early agricultural experiment in South Asia. Now, you would naturally think this would lead straight into full-blown farming, right?
Well, it didn't. Instead of slowly developing a true Neolithic farming culture with basic agriculture, or a Chalcolithic age using copper, Sri Lanka essentially skipped those typical evolutionary stages entirely. The archaeological record reveals this massive pause on full-scale farming. They maintained a long, highly successful hunter-gatherer phase for thousands of years before taking a sudden, unbelievable leap forward in technology.
Which brings us to Section 4, the Iron Age leap. Metals, villages, and pottery.
For thousands of years, during the Mesolithic period, Sri Lankans were mobile foragers, using those tiny stone microliths we talked about, and they had absolutely no native pottery tradition.
But then, right around 1000 BCE, there is a drastic, seemingly overnight shift. Mobile forging is suddenly replaced by permanent settled villages. Those delicate stone microliths give way to heavy forged iron tools, and out of nowhere, we see the widespread use of highly durable red and black ware pottery.
These early Iron Age innovations fundamentally transformed the island. This wasn't just some gradual shift, it was a total revolution. Iron metalworking and blacksmithing exploded onto the scene. True agriculture finally took root with the widespread cultivation of rice on the alluvial plains. Villagers began domesticating cattle, pigs, and water buffalo. And as their society grew more and more complex, they began organizing themselves differently, which we can clearly see through the construction of massive megalithic cemeteries.
This ties right into Section 5, Ancient Rituals and Beliefs, and how they honored the dead.
Now, we obviously don't have written records of their religion, but their graves tell a profoundly human story. At Fa-Hien Cave, archaeologists discovered a practice called secondary burial. First, bodies were left to naturally decompose. Then, in a highly deliberate, careful, and deeply intimate act, the bones were gathered up. Finally, they were placed in graves, often coated with vibrant red ochre. They weren't just disposing of a body here. This multi-step process shows a deep ritual concern for their loved ones and strongly points to an early, complex belief in the spirit.
And as we move into the Iron Age, these rituals grow even more elaborate. At sites like Ibn Khatwa, dating to around 1000 to 800 BCE, researchers have uncovered massive megalithic tombs. These feature stone-lined cist burials and large urns filled with human remains. More importantly, though, they contain grave goods and offerings, beautiful pottery vessels, some bearing simple, incised motifs. It's a fascinating discovery that strongly indicates a society actively practicing ancestor veneration, holding intricate beliefs about what exactly comes after death.
Finally, Section 6, Legend versus Archaeological Reality. Let's look at the myths of the chronicles.
If you're at all familiar with traditional Sri Lankan lore, like the epic poem, the Mahavamsa, you've probably heard the fantastical origin stories. The mythic chronicles spook of an island ruled by giant or supernatural yakas, serpent-like nagas, and the magical queen Kuveni, long before Prince Vijaya's arrival in the 6th century BCE. But the archaeological reality grounds us in something very different. The empirical record actually shows a landscape inhabited by deeply capable, incredibly human Mesolithic foragers who seamlessly evolved into Iron Age farmers.
The science is crystal clear here. There is absolutely no physical evidence of distinct mythological races like the Yakas or Nagas. Furthermore, until the legendary arrival of Prince Vijaya, there is very little evidence of foreign colonization. No foreign artifacts, like the trade goods we see in later centuries, appear in these prehistoric layers. Early farming, ironworking, and pottery arrived through gradual adoption and local evolution, not through wholesale invasions or mythical giants. The vibrant culture of prehistoric Sri Lanka was, end-to-end, entirely homegrown.
We have uncovered so much about this island, from 125,000-year-old stone tools to the world's earliest non-African bows, all the way to unprecedented early experiments with wild grains. Yet, when we consider how isolated and completely unique Sri Lanka's prehistoric evolution was and how much of its dense rainforest and alluvial soil remains completely untouched by modern shovels, we really have to ask ourselves, what else lies buried out there? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the history beneath your feet.